Hi, I'm John Kursky, and the Power Query Lint team wants you to be an AI-enabled tester of Power BI. That's why we're excited to announce the new testing tool called PQL.Assert, which is open source and is leveraging user-defined functions in Power BI. So in this series, we're going to show you how to lay the foundation, build tests, and then use AI to build and run tests for you. So without further ado, let's start with part one. All right, so if you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the new videos we'll be putting out in the coming weeks. And with that, I'm going to start with my screen here. This is the new page on Power Query Lint, which provides you information about PQL.Assert. Now, for me, testing is a big part of building semantic models. And the reason is there is a lot of times you'll make mistakes or the upstream data just doesn't come in on time. And when those issues come up in production, it is more advantageous for you to be aware of them before your customer does. And even if your customer finds those flaws, often they'll give you a pass if the first time you make a mistake. But if they see that same error in production, again, either days, weeks, or even months later, you're going to lose trust with those customers. This is why testing is foundational to building semantic models. And with a new feature brought by Power BI in late 2025, we can now reuse code to be able to run these functions. And so on the screen here, I have PQL.Assert, which is a set of functions that you can bring into your model and do testing. So if you've worked with npm test before or Pester from a different development platform or even PyTest, what I'm going to show you today should look very familiar. And we want to take the best practices from other industries and bring them to semantic model testing. So the way you can lay out and start using PQL.Assert is, I'm going to leave this link in the YouTube description, but if you go to view on DAX Lib, this is going to take you to a page. Now, DAX Lib is a wonderful resource provided by SQL BI where folks can share packages of user-defined functions that are DAX-based with other teams in an open source form. Now, I've got up on my screen here version 1.5. Maybe by the time that you're following along in this video, this could be a later version of the code. But suffice it to say, it is comprehensive in terms of what you can do testing with. And when you bring these functions in, which I'm going to show you, you'll be able to do basic, what we call assertions in the testing world, where you can say, here's my test. Under this condition, I want it to be true. I can set certain numeric comparisons. Maybe I want to do an aggregation on revenue and make sure that under a certain time frame, it is at least this much. I can also compare strings, and the ones that I really enjoy using is the column assertions, where I want to make sure when I rebuild that model, that certain column is distinct or it doesn't have any blanks in it. And if it does, the test will fail. I can also make sure that tables, if I zoom in here real quick, have certain row counts. Very critical to making sure that if you're relying on data upstream and maybe it gets wiped out in the evening and you go to refresh it and it hasn't been hydrated yet, this could be a problem. You can test for that. Also, you can test for relationships if they exist. Often it's very easy in Power Query to maybe accidentally delete a column that's important to your model. You can test to make sure that that relationship isn't broken. And later on in this series, I'm going to show you what test discovery is. But the idea is, just in real short, you can build out tests in DAX Query View and retrieve those either with Power BI Desktop open or remotely. And so you could do conceivably Power Automate, query a model, get tests, execute those tests, and see if those tests pass. This is the beauty of having user-defined functions. We can do that now and be able to be consistent in the way we do testing. All right, and then we also have a set of preliminary best practice validations in the PQL.Assert library. So you can look at things like making sure certain columns or the columns that you have, numeric columns, aren't summarized. So performance or formatting advantage or best practice. You can also make sure that your DAX expressions have qualified column references. You can make sure the auto date table is removed. All things that come with the standard best practices that you have seen in the Microsoft community, albeit not all the best practices just yet. We're working on getting more of those in. All right, so maybe you're at this point, you're excited about bringing the functions into your model. How do I do that? Now, I'm going to go to Power BI Desktop. Now, I've got a model which I will share on GitHub that you can download. I'll have the link in the description. If you go to File and you go to Options and Settings, I'm going to click on Options here, and under Preview Features, you will want to make sure that you have DAX user-defined functions clicked. Now, if this is the first time you're turning this on, you're going to click the checkbox. You'll get a prompt to restart Power BI Desktop. So you're going to close Power BI Desktop. You're going to open Power BI Desktop back, and user-defined functions will then be available. It's important to note that you need to be on a recent release of Power BI Desktop. I'm using the App Store, so I am on the January 2026 release. If you're on an early release and don't see this preview features, please upgrade your Power BI Desktop. Okay, so at this point, if I want to add the functions, I can go to up at the top here, click Add to Power BI, copy. Now I'm going to go back to the Tyndall view. This is where we're going to load the data. Tyndall view. Or I'm sorry, we're going to load the functions. So I've already got this pasted, but just to show you, I'm going to paste that here. And all the functions are defined in this one file. And this create and or replace command is what is going to add the functions to your semantic model. You're going to hit apply. And then you'll notice on the right-hand side, there is a functions area where you can look at all the functions that have been added, whether you're incorporating more functions or just the PQL.Assert functions. These will be listed in your Tyndall view here. Now, let's say I want to start writing tests. The best way to do that is to go to the DAX Query View. Now in DAX Query View, you will be able to access these functions using the evaluate command. If I do PQL.Assert, I have a IntelliSense here that is going to show all the PQL functions that I can use. I'm going to type in PQL.Assert.tbl, which is short for table. And one of the reasons it's not laid out, say the word table, is that's a reserved word. So we're trying to avoid other DAX reserved words. Now, just to show you a simple example now, should have rows. Most of the function tests, you start with the first parameter, which is the test. So I want to make sure that the alignment dim always has rows. That's my test. And then I will reference the table. So I'm going to say alignment dim, click that, and hit run. Now at this point near the bottom here, it has outputted a standard set for all these tests. You're always going to have a test name, you're going to have an expected, an actual and a past, whether that's true or false. One of the benefits of using something like user-defined functions in PQL.Assert is we standardize the schema so that across any semantic model, if you're using this library, this is the standard schema that you can expect the responses to the test to be. When you standardize the responses, that makes it easier to check if you have any failed or completed tests and which tests those are. Now, that's just an easy way to write a test and execute a test. How about actually building out a set of tests? Well, I'm going to go to another tab here just to show you how this syntax is laid out. Now, when you want to define a test, and we'll go into this further in another session, but you can type in the word define, put in the word function, and define the name of your function. Now, we like to use the type of testing you're doing, the environment, and then the .tests suffix. This is what's going to be very important when we want to retrieve tests, how we can use that naming convention to be able to retrieve the tests we want to execute and which environment we want to execute in. I'll go into that more in another session. You define the function, you'll put in the parameters. In this case, we're not executing on any parameters here. And then you can union each function call. So you can see here the first function I have, alignment did should have rows. Then I have a column-based check to make sure that the iColor ID in the iColor dimension is distinct. And then lastly, I can check to make sure there's no blanks in the date column in my calendar or date table. Now, when I go to execute this, you'll see that it is showing that the last one has failed. Now, you can even go further and add that function to the model, which I'm going to do now. And then when I run it, it will actually have this registered in the model. So I can actually open up a new tab and execute that. I can even set it up where maybe I'm only interested in the failed tests. I can say passed. False. So now you can see I just filtered. Since the function returns a table, I can filter on that, and then I can return just the failed tests. All right, so I encourage you, try out PQL.Assert. This is the foundation for you to get started. In our next set of videos, we're going to take a deeper dive on how do you test measures, how do you set up tabs, and then we will show you, all right, this is wonderful on how to do this manually. How do you set up AI to write these tests, or at least build the foundation of these tests for you? I think it's important to understand, though, the syntax and how user-defined functions are set up so that when AI is writing the code, you can double-check it. And with that, I appreciate your time today, and until the next video, take care.